Alright, hello. In this video, we are going to be reviewing for the Chapter 5 quiz on methods. I just have a bunch of questions for you to try. As always, I'd have you pause the video and try them first before checking your answers against mine. You also might want to have a notebook out to record your work. Alright, here's your first question. Give it a shot. Okay, so first off, the method is called append, and it takes in an int and a string in that order. So it has to be int first, then string. So that would make this one possible. B would not work. This one does have an int and string, so this one is possible. The last one takes an only a string, so that's definitely out. And then the other thing is it returns a string type. So we'd want to, when we call the method, we want to store it in a string variable, which would be done in letter C. And letter A would be trying to store the returned string in an int, and that would not work. So C is our best answer here. Okay, so here's just some general method questions. I guess I got the order of the numbers wrong on there. So I fixed it quick. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Try these questions quick. Pause the video, and then when you are done, unpause the video to watch the answers. Check your work. All right, so how many inputs can you send into a method? And the answer to that is, as far as I know, it's infinite. Right? There's probably a limit at some point, but we'll just say many. Right? I don't even know if the most I've ever done in a method, but certainly you can have anywhere from 0 up to, I don't know, 100 or so. So maybe let's just put that here. 0 to about 100. As far as the return values, you can have only one or 0. So remember, a return, if you don't have a return, you call that void. So you can either return nothing or just one variable. A method must return something. The answer to that is false, right? It can be a void method, in which case nothing is returned. That would usually happen if you're just printing a bunch of stuff to screen. So if your method just printed information, then you would make it void and you wouldn't return anything. All right, what is nonsensical about number 4 is the last line can never be reached. All right, because once you do return, the method ends. So it's going to calculate this balance, return the interest, and then boom, it ends. So this line can never be reached, which you can actually see it's underlined here. In my Eclipse, it must have been giving me an error saying this line cannot be reached. So the last line will never run. So Eclipse is saying, hey, you really shouldn't put any code down there because it has no chance of ever running. All right, one of the uses of methods is to break the code into smaller chunks, and I think the answer to that is absolutely yes. So to make it into tiny little pieces, and then code the pieces, and then put them all together to get the program to run. Right, and that is super important idea because as a program becomes complex, it's easier to think of like, can I do this one little task first? Just make something display, then make that thing move, right? If you're doing a video game, right? Then make a little score variable for your video game. So start in tiny little pieces and code each piece, and that's what methods are. You break it down into different pieces. So think about the Pythagorean Theorem one we did in class. We made a method that got leg 1, called it again to get leg 2, made a method to calculate the hypotenuse, and then made another method to display it. So we took the little task, the little parts of that program, and broke it into methods. All right, so kind of a tricky one. But what's going to be the value of balance at the end of this code? Okay, and so the answer is balance will actually still be 100 at this point. And the reason is we want to add interest here or whatever, but this balance variable has scope and exists only up in this main method. Okay, so this particular balance, I know we have another one called balance here, but this is actually a separate variable that has scope in the second method. All right, and so what happens is we pass in the value of 100, but the actual value, the actual variable balance up here is unchanged, right? So we just take in the value 100, multiply it by 5% essentially, and then return that interest. So the interest would be $5, and the balance would be 100 still. So we return $105, but it's never stored. right? So if we want to actually overwrite balance, we have to do, I'm not going to be able to fit it all in here, but we have to do balance equals whatever is returned by that method. That'll pass in the value of 100 and then overwrite your balance variable up here with whatever is returned. All right, so if you want to like modify the value in main, you have to return it and then overwrite the value, just shown there. And that's pretty tricky, pretty confusing. So hopefully that made sense, right? If we did it this way, then it'd be 105. If we had it returned with the equal sign here, it'd be 105. Otherwise, it's going to be 100. All right, what is displayed by this code? Okay, so I'm always going to start with my for loop of I, which starts at 0, goes up by 1, and stays less than 3. So it goes 0, 1, 2. When we hit 3, it's not going to run because 3 is not less than 3. And then we're going to call it with these values for I, right? So it passes in whatever number down here. And then this is going to print out 1 more plus the number. So whatever the input is, plus 1 times whatever the input is, plus 1. So for 0, it would actually do 1 times 1. For 1, it would actually do 2 times 2. And when we send in the 2, right, when you send in a 2 down here, we will do 3 times 3. That would be 9. So this is going to print out 1, 4, and 9. Okay, so think about a method named displayVals that's void and that takes in 2 strings. Okay, so how would you call it if it's void and it takes in 2 strings? So how would you call it and what would the method heading look like? Pause the video and give it a shot. Okay, so to call it, we would just use its name, display vowels. Okay, and nothing is returned, so we don't need like a equal sign here. We don't need to set the return of display vowels to something over here, right? We're just going to call it with its name, and then it's just going to pass in 2 strings. So we can just take whatever 2 strings we want with a comma between them and pass them in. Okay, and then what the method heading would look like is it would be public, static, as our methods have always started so far. The return is nothing, so we do void. Do the name of it. All right, and then in parentheses, we're going to say what comes in. So we're going to have 2 strings, and you have to give them names. So like string 1 and then string 2 or something like that. Okay, and no semicolon here, just an open and close curly brace for the method code. Right, so we give it a type and a name with a comma between them. So we have 2 strings here, and you can name them whatever you want. I just happen to pick string 1, string 2. All right, last review question here. What is wrong with this code? Pause the video and give it a shot. Okay, so at first glance, my guess here is that, so math.random again is 0 to 0.99999 repeating, and we are taking that times 3. So if I take these 2 numbers times 3, that will be, I'm just going to multiply the bounds by 3, so it'd be 0 times 3, and then 3 times 0.99999 would be 2.99999. The next line here takes that random number and turns it into an int called IDX. So IDX is going to be 0 to 2 because it's going to chop off the decimal part. And so the problem is we want to probably make it go into one of these 3 buckets. So like Larry, Curly, and Moe, which are the 3 Stooges if you're not sure of that. This should probably be 0, 1, and 2 because 3 can't ever happen based on this code. So the way it was set up originally, the if, there's no way that would ever be reached down here. All right. And then also I think it would probably make the most sense, depending on what we're trying to do here, I guess, but normally I would do like an else if. If I'm trying to force it into one of 3 buckets, I would do an else if. So do if it equals 0, else if it equals 1, do curly, else if it equals 2, do Moe. I think that would probably make the most sense. That would force it to go down one of the 3 paths. right? And then we could probably put an else on the very end if we wanted, just saying there's an error, right? Because we wanted it to be 0, 1, or 2. And then we can have an else that says basically there's an error in our code somewhere. We shouldn't have reached this point in the code. All right, that is it for quiz review. Thank you for watching.